solitude he has chosen for himself. He and his scorched earth advisors have backed themselves into a corner and they see no other way out. An election might well be in the interests, or in his interests, although I doubt he will win it when it comes. But that doesn't make Brexit or a Brexit election desirable, far from it. A general election should never be decided on a single issue. Brexit is the biggest issue of our age, but it's not the only one. That's the homeless people clutched in doorways around here, wondering which of their number will survive the freezing winter, or the vulnerable living in fear of crime as our overstretched police recede yet further from our streets, or the 20% of teachers expected to leave the profession in the next 2 years, driven out by austerity that makes their working lives so unbearable. Ask the communities that have lost their libraries, music venues and community centres. Ask anybody. There's a lot more than just Brexit at stake in a general election. Yet my concern is that those voices won't be heard over the braying bullies in the Tory leadership, who throughout the forthcoming election will be shouting Brexit do or die. The Prime Minister wants a Brexit election, but I don't think we should give it to him on his terms. I can't see much doubt that Boris Johnson is the most disgraceful Conservative politician of his generation. Worse than Margaret Thatcher, I would say, in the scale of damage he's trying to do to the country. His naked contempt for democratic institutions, not just the EU, but the UK Parliament, the British Constitution, the Conservative Party. He's trying to trash them all. And yet I do believe that each one of those great democratic institutions, the EU, the UK Parliament, the British Constitution, and yes, even the traditional One Nation Conservative Party, is bigger and better than he is. That Britain will prevail over Boris Johnson, and that we will set about repairing the great nation that he is trying to destroy. For that, of course, we need an election. But as I say, it needs to be much more about than just Brexit. Once Parliament has returned from the 5-week prorogation on which we unbelievably now find ourselves in, our first priority must be to prevent a disastrous no-deal Brexit. The reasons why are almost literally too numerous to list. There is almost no aspect of life, wealth or well-being in Britain that wouldn't be damaged by a no-deal Brexit. But today I'd like to set out what I see as the threats to the creative industries in particular. Many of you here today will have first-hand experience of these challenges. 2/5 of the UK creative businesses surveyed stressed that a no-deal scenario would harm their businesses' ability to export, and 1/5 would, in the event of a no-deal, consider moving all or part of their businesses abroad. We know that self-shrinking isolationism will fail our cultural economy. The prime example is ease of movement. Touring is the lifeblood of your industries, from orchestras to dance productions to individual artists alike. Losing the ability to cross borders quickly and easily would be disastrous, with UK music warning that the knock-on effects of no deal could result in a 40% income loss for acts touring in the EU. Or consider how dropping out of the EU funding schemes might have provided that have provided over £40 million a year will impact on the sector. Or how no deal would instantly threaten our status as a global hub for data flows. Or how a crude skills and salary approach to migration simply won't work for the creative economy, where many skilled professional salaries fall below the £30,000 threshold, including musicians, librarians, artists and graphic designers. And it's not just about the practicalities. It's a matter of principle too. The narrow, isolationist, bring down the portcullis mentality represented by no deal runs counter to everything the UK's creative and cultural sectors stand for. Art's power lies in its capacity for connection, because at its heart, it's about people. And I think Dylan Thomas captured this well when he wrote, "Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spendthrift pages, nor for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art." At its best, art articulates the details and differences of our lives and also helps us to understand our universal experiences, the loves and griefs that all people share. And that exchange has been at the heart of the creative industries for as long as they've existed. Our painters, playwrights, our composers have traded ideas and influences with their colleagues on the continent for centuries. That's why it comes as no surprise that 96% of Creative Industry Federation members intended to vote Remain ahead of the referendum, or that the Federation has pushed for a public vote. We need an outward-looking, welcoming Britain, a United Kingdom comfortable and confident with its place in the world, open to new ideas and different cultures. But that is not the United Kingdom that this government is shaping. Their bunker mentality only serves to blinker and divide us. We need look no further than the settled status system, a national scandal that should shame us all. Every day we hear about EU citizens seeing their applications rejected, although they've lived here for years. People who have built their lives here being turned away because they can't provide paperwork they never thought they'd need. We've already seen the result of the Tories' hostile environment with the Windrush scandal, and now it's happening again. This callous, draconian system will weaken the creative workforce. A third of workers in visual effects come from the EU, as do a fifth of those who work in architecture, in video games and in the performing arts. We should be working to retain their talents, not rejecting their applications to stay. The people this government are turning away are our colleagues and our neighbours, our partners and our parents. We cannot and will not forget that. And we will not turn our backs on our friends. And it's not just the creative industries. For every other sector of the economy has its own list of immediate concerns, because Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings are determined to drive the nation off the cliff of no deal, and they've failed to prepare for it. People will suffer in pain and distress who shouldn't have to because of medicine shortages. People may die who don't have to. Every relevant professional organisation has said so. Once we've stopped a disastrous no-deal Brexit, our next priority should be a confirmatory public vote on where Britain goes from here. I campaigned for Remain in 2016, but when the country voted narrowly to leave, I accepted that result. Even after 18 months, when a deal still hadn't been reached and we still hadn't left, I kept faith with the result of that vote. Even after 2.5 years, when Theresa May reached a deal with Brussels, I still said, I can't vote for that deal, so we must negotiate a better one. Very difficult though it was, I and many others respected the result of the 2016 referendum for a very long time. But there eventually comes a point, and we are very far past it now, when circumstances are so changed, when so much new information has emerged, when so many people now feel differently. There comes a point when you have to say, actually, no. That years-old plebiscite is no longer a valid basis on which to take such a momentous decision about the future of the United Kingdom. The only proper way to proceed in such circumstances is to consult the people again in a referendum with a credible option to leave and remain on the ballot paper, as Labour have committed to do. Why are Boris Johnson's Tory faction so terrified of that? If there is still a majority for Brexit, what do they have to fear? If there isn't any more, how can it be? How can it then be democratic to leave just because there used to be a majority for it more than 3 years ago, when so many things were different? It's impossible to coherently argue that the referendum result has been ignored. The Tory party has torn itself apart for more than 3 years trying to deliver it. But it failed. And Brexit has proved impossible to deliver because it entails, in all its conceivable forms, great harm to our country. And our national institutions and our representatives are not designed to deliver that. Indeed, they are set up to prevent it. Whatever people's views on Brexit in our party or more widely, I get the overriding sense that most people are seeking compromise to help find a resolution to this crisis. We saw the first steps to that in the indicative votes the House of Commons held just a few months ago, where the confirmatory vote on a credible deal option came top both times, just short of a majority. It wasn't the top preference for everyone, but it was a point at which they were willing to compromise. Colleagues like Stephen Kinnock are absolutely right to say we need a credible deal. And we would, of course, need a deal at the heart of any confirmatory vote. So I am confident we can bring people together to move forward and find a resolution in this crisis. I know that not all Labour MPs agree on the best way forward for Brexit. Some sincerely believe that it's in the best interests of their constituents to get that deal. Some believe profoundly in Remain. But all Labour MPs agree on the social challenges the country faces, from homelessness to police cuts to supporting our NHS. And we all agree we need a Labour government to solve them. So let's deal with Brexit in a referendum, where every person can have their say, and then come together and fight an election on Labour's positive social agenda, on our own terms, not on Boris Johnson's Brexit do or die. And this is not least because increasing numbers of Conservatives and former Conservatives recognise this too, and tell me so both privately and publicly. Just look at what Oliver Letwin, a man who voted 3 times for May's deal, has said in the past 2 days. He is seeking compromise too. And I think it's on that rock of a deal, plus a confirmatory vote, that compromise and a way forward can be found. Then will we be able to make the case loud and clear for ending austerity and investing in our people, our public services and our communities. We will be able to focus on the social issues the nation cares so much about: our NHS, our police forces, our schools, our community centres, our transport infrastructure, our environment, our planet. That's why we need to end this Brexit crisis, to focus on those issues, to win an election on that platform. Boris Johnson has already conceded that the Brexit crisis can only be solved by the British people. But the only way to break the Brexit deadlock, once and for all, is a public vote in a referendum. A general election could fail to solve Brexit chaos. But if, as I accept is currently the case, we are more likely, in the first instance, to have a general election, then a referendum, then Labour will decide its position at the Clause 5 manifesto meeting. There are many other stakeholders in that room who will have their say. I'm just one voice among the many. But I will argue that our position going into that election should be totally clear. We should unambiguously and unequivocally back Remain. We should back Remain not for electoral or tactical reasons, but because it is the right thing to do for the country at this time of greatest crisis since the Second World War. I believe we should remain in the EU because on every level It's important to the future of our country, to the economic well-being, the health and the physical security of our people, the sustainability of our environment, the fairness and decency, the richness of our country, in the deepest sense, the kind of country that we are. I don't believe there is such a thing as a good Brexit deal, which is why I think we should advocate for Remain. It's what the overwhelming majority of Labour Party members, MPs and trade unionists believe too. If we go into the election with a clear position on Brexit, then we will be able to spend more time talking about all the things the Tories don't want to talk about. The NHS, crime, education, the housing crisis, the cuts to arts and cultural services right across the country. And we need the space to discuss these things because there is so much Labour wants to change and so much we want to achieve. Some people argue it's too late for Labour to win back Remain voters, but I don't believe that. My experience on the doorstep tells me most of those who've deserted us over our Brexit policy did so with deep regret and would greatly prefer to come back. They just want us to take an unequivocal position that whatever happens, we'll fight to remain and to sound like we mean it. It would be easy to be 400,000 voices sounding like we mean it, because we do. And if we did, we could win. Whereas if we don't, I fear we won't. If we do win, we've got an exciting vision for what a Labour government will do to support the creative industries. Everyone here today knows that the creative industries are a national success story, worth over £100 billion to the UK economy and supporting 2 million jobs. And we've seen how culture can transform.
Well, Tom Watson, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, making clear there that he wants a referendum on Brexit before a general election, which, of course, is counter to the policy as outlined by the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. Yesterday, we'll have reaction to that and, indeed, to the court ruling against the government on prorogation in Scotland. Coming up in just a moment here on All Out Politics.